And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Let me be serious here for a moment. I usually have silly stuff going on. Well, okay, there's going to be silly stuff going on in the background. I tell you about a lot of different games over the course of the year. And occasionally you hear me say, this is one of the best of whatever year it is. And this year that I'm recording this video, it's 2010. But I think what I'm talking about here is not going to be just one of the best games of 2010. I think this is going to be one of the best games of the decade. And that game is Dominant Species. Dominant Species is a game about the ancient times and from yore, where you have mammals fighting arachnids, fighting insects. Each player takes one of these major things. For example, you might be the amphibians, and you are going to try and control the region, try and get the most points. You're doing that by trying to make your species adaptable to different environments so that you can survive there, by fighting off the other ones, by having the most in different regions, by controlling the most powerful, the most point-giving regions. This game includes very strong interaction. It includes worker placement. It includes 2 different kinds of area control. It sounds confusing, but it's not. Everything works together really well. The only thing that this game has going against it is its length. And here I am giving my summary before we even look at the game, so let's just look at this fantastic game. There's no way that I can give you a complete details of how this game works, but I will do my best to give you a short summary of how this game goes down. If you can see, this is the starting setup. You can play with other starting setups, but this is the one for most games, and it looks very symmetrical because it is. However, the game is going to change as you play. In fact, it won't remain symmetrical, I think, after the first minute or so. Each player starts with different species in different areas. The cube stands for whatever you are, and you also will have these cones to show if you are dominant in an area or not. Now, dominance does not mean how many cubes you have, whether it means are you more likely to survive in an area, are you more adaptable to the elements in that area. As you can see here, each area has a certain number of elements that are touching on the different vertices of that hexagon, and during the course of the game these are going to come on and off, and you can control where they are, and depending on the adaptability of your animal, you will be able to have survival in different things. Let me show you one of the species. Here are the cards for 3 of the species: reptiles, birds, and amphibians, and there's also mammals, insects, and arachnids. But on these it shows, for example, reptiles do well in the sun, so they have 2 markers there. Birds have 2 of these markers, amphibians have 3 of the water markers. As the game progresses, you will be able to add more of these markers to your board, making you work in different environments in a better and easier fashion. You can also lose some of them too. But the more of these you gain, you can be dominant in an area, even if you don't have the most cubes there, simply because you have more of these matching. For example, in a hex that has 2 waters and 1 of the seeds here, if those were touching the hex vertices, then the amphibians would have a strength of 1, 2, 3 times 2, 6, and 1 times 1, so they would have a strength of 7, while the eagles would have a strength of 2. 2 times 1 is 2, and the reptiles would have a strength of 0 in that spot. In fact, they wouldn't even be able to survive there very long. So, again, you're trying to increase these as the game goes by. Where do we do that? Let me show you. Each player has a certain amount of action markers. They look like this. They can be placed on these eyes on the side of the board at the beginning of the game. Depends how many players are playing. And where you place these depends on what you're going to do each turn. The top row, you place them here, and whoever places them here is going to add more to their ability to handle different environments. The ones that aren't taken come down here in the regression box, and those can come off your board unless you stop it. Abundance, these can be added onto the board in different places. Wasteland, they'll come off the board. Then, as we move farther down, you can see that glaciation here will allow you to put glaciers, tundra on the board, destroying the environment, and, well, some animals might be able to survive better in it. Below that, we have speciation. That's how you grow. You can add more depending on the region. Some regions you can add more than others. Wanderlust, which means you're going to put out a new hexagon to build the board. Migration, to move your people around on the board. Competition, also known as war, where you can pick one where you're going to fight and kill off other species in your spot. And then domination, that's where you put tokens so that you can score victory points at the end of the game. And the victory points are determined by who has the most cubes in an area. You check and see who has the most cubes. They'll get a certain amount of points depending on what kind of terrain it is. As you can see all the way over here, their different terrains will give different amounts of victory points. And then the player who has domination of an area, whether they have the most cubes there or not, gets to choose one of these cards over here on the side of the board. And these cards are super powerful, to say the least. Look at Catastrophe. Select a tile. Eliminate all but one species there. Eliminate one species on each adjacent tile. That's powerful. And so you're trying to maneuver your way to get these cards. And so as the game progresses, you can see how it starts like that. You'll see more and more hexes added to the board as the game goes by. And more of these tokens will be placed around them. Tundra will start destroying different spaces. A player can get points for having the most cubes in Tundra. And the whole game feels like a very strong war game. But over here we have our area control. On the board, and then over there we have our action worker placement. You're involved all the time because you don't know what's going to happen at any given point. And what's really neat is that each of these species, while you can customize them to whatever you want, has a bit of a special ability. For example, birds can move 2 spaces when they move, unlike everyone else who can only move 1. Mammals can survive better than other. Insects spread easier. Arachnids get a free fighting action every turn. And then of course, they use different elements to survive. And then there's even a food chain over here, which is more important than you think, because sometimes ties are settled by this food chain. And so mammals have an innate ability to be the first in line. And of course, there's initiative, whoever goes first, and you can move around on that too. And there's so much going on. And like I said, the game's going to be pretty lengthy, but it can be really involved and really fun as you decide, are you going to move, are you going to fight, are you going to try to control certain hexes on the board? Are you going to increase your species so you can survive pretty much anywhere? Or are you going to kill off those species because you don't know what else to do with them? All this is going on in one very tight, very well-designed game. So there you have it. It's a very, very good game. It's definitely going to be on my top 10 of the year of 2010, and is one of the best games I've played in quite a while. I think that there's just a lot going on. I wish I could play quicker with 6 players. It is going to be an involved game, a lot of back and forth, but it's not a bad game with 6 players. Very involved. Yeah, you can be cut off, but you can make alliances and do different things. It's very interesting. It gives me the feeling of a war game, the feeling of a tactical game, area control. There's a lot of things put together, and the theme is very strong. When I'm playing the reptiles, I feel differently than when I'm playing the amphibians. They have different feels as to how they work. And even if one person is a runaway lead, or so it seems, there's many different ways to stop them. Just an absolute gem of a game. You owe it to yourself to play it at least once. The length may turn it off for you, but I wouldn't. Check it out anyway.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.